Amanda.
And I'm Mel.
And this is the Road Back Home podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Road Back Home. So I thought that we would talk about boundaries and how to set them, giving you language to use also, and specifically the role of empathy in boundaries. But we're going to do it through the lens of something called your personal bill of rights. And so the personal bill of rights empowers people to assert their needs and boundaries. And we've already spoken on the podcast before about, about the importance of being able to identify your needs and being able to communicate your needs. And also you will need to, based on your needs and, boundaries are important in terms of how you go about honoring your needs. And so a popular version of this personal Bill of Rights was introduced in the Anxiety and Phobia Workbook by Edmund J. Bourne, as in the Bourne identity. And it lists a bunch of rights that we're going to go through. And these are affirmations, and they help you to counteract unhealthy patterns like people pleasing, and they help you to reinforce self-worth. And they are a very, very useful thing to have in your arsenal of tools of recovery. So I sent them on to you, Mel. Was this your first time to come across a thing such as the Personal Bill of Rights?
It was. And it's funny because, when we talk about a boundary, I feel like that word boundary has become synonymous with like something very negative, something very hard, something very final. But,
Yes.
this is very exciting to see that a boundary is not necessarily about shutting other people out.
Yes.
And I'm excited about that part because, I think I have resisted boundaries in some cases simply because it feels so final and it almost feels like burning a bridge, and it doesn't have to be.
Yes. I was actually thinking about this after our last episode because after when I'm editing, I'm listening. So I get to listen to our episodes several times before they're actually published. And something that struck me after I don't know if it was our last conversation or what conversation it was, but I was like, gosh, I wonder, and it has been the case for me, very often a boundary feels like a punishment. Or it might feel like you're abandoning somebody. A boundary feels like a withdrawal of love.
Yes. And that has been a deterrent for me, I think, in many ways.
Yeah, yeah, which is a very interesting thing and an important thing to acknowledge. Because a boundary is an act of love. It's an act of self-love, but it's also an act of love in terms of like what love is and what love isn't. Like love isn't that kind of like what would you say, maybe in terms of people pleasing, but like love sometimes is like with a child, you like love is making sure that you brush your teeth, you know?
Mm.
It's hashtag boring self-care. Love is not just let's go to McDonald's. That's not love. Love is not just like doing everything that the kid wants to do. Sure, you can stay up late and eat all the sweets, of course. Love comes from a perspective that is higher than that, that says, well, I know that that's what would be fun in the moment, but I also know that without sleep and without adequate nutrition and without adequate hygiene, they're going to have a negative impact on your life.
Right.
So that think of love as like the higher vision, the higher, I suppose, power, but it is the higher knowing, the part who does come in and say, look, I know what would be fun in the moment, and I know it will be hard. I know it will be hard to not, do the fun thing right now.
Mm.
And I also know that you can handle that.
The other thing that struck me reading the outline was the reclaiming of our own rights as humans.
Yes.
We spend so much time pleasing others and setting up environments to make it comfortable for others, even though we might be uncomfortable in it. In the long run, we feel that if we do that, well, we might we might get a more peaceful experience. We might
Mhm.
get less, um, of a negative experience from somebody who might be difficult by, catering to their needs. If I make this person comfortable and happy, and then I show up, even though I really don't want to be there, I'll just put myself through it for a couple of hours and maybe I'll walk away, without a scratch. And at the end of the
Yeah.
day, we abandon ourselves. So, the Bill of Rights that
Mm.
we're about to discuss and that I've looked over since you sent it is it feels it just feels like a reclaiming of
Mm.
self in a few ways.
Yeah, it was an absolute game changer for me when I came across this. I was like, what? So, the other thing as well is, so we're going to kind of discuss, like I said, we're discussing boundaries and we're using the Personal Bill of Rights as a kind of a way into this discussion. So, we want to acknowledge up front that for some people, a boundary can feel like a punishment. For some people, it can feel like a withdrawal of love. It can feel like you are abandoning a person. And what we want to help you see is that boundary can be done. It doesn't have to be hard in terms of like, here's the thing. How we normally go about, so if you struggle with boundaries, how you might go about softening the boundaries is apologizing unnecessarily, over explaining yourself, using emojis if it's a boundary you're setting in a chat, all of that. And what that does is that actually undermines the effectiveness of your boundary. And what you're trying to do there, you're just trying to, because you think that the boundary is just being too hard with people, you're trying to soften it. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a way of essentially softening the language around your boundaries instead of softening the actual boundary, is to bring empathy in so that your boundary can still be firm and yet it can be empathetic because you can be compassionate in how you go about setting it. So I
Mm.
hope that that will really help here, so that you don't have to soften it with all the things that drown out the message you need to convey that is really important that you need to convey with the all the things that I said. So
Before you go any further, Amanda, this reminds me of our overuse of emojis.
yeah.
And I'm so conscious of it. And I try to pull back from using an
Mhm.
emoji. And like you said, choosing language rather than the emoji because it does, listen, sometimes it just works. But
Mhm.
I'm sure there is a more direct way to communicate that you are about to delve into.
Yeah, we can, and this, like everything else, is going to be a practice. So this is the thing that you practice. You have to be willing to be bad at it before you become anyway competent at it. And that's all you can do is you can only work on your competence levels with this. So the importance of empathic boundary setting is, we've already said that. And so when I talk about bringing empathy in and when I talk about, kind of like honoring needs, again, I am nodding. If anybody wants to learn more about this, I'm nodding towards the work of Marshall Rosenberg. His language model, nonviolent communication, is definitely worth exploring. So, um, let's get into the Personal Bill of Rights. And what we are going to do is, first of all, I'm going to read down through the Personal Bill of Rights, or maybe you will, Mel, and or maybe what I'll do is I will read down through them and then ask you, are there any there that might be a surprise to you, or what ones might stand out to you? And we just kind of discuss the Personal Bill of Rights first, and then what we're going to do is we're going to kind of like revisit them in terms of like if Mel says something like, oh, this one here is one that I would probably struggle with. We're going to actually give scenarios and statements that you can
Mm.
use to actually have like what a boundary would sound like in a scenario that is relevant to this specific need.
Love
Okay,
that.
yes. So, in no particular order, and this is not an exhaustive list, but I'm going to read out the rights that I have on this page. And like everything, if you want a copy of this, please do subscribe to our Substack. It is just like a newsletter. You just give an email address, and it just means that our episodes go straight to your inbox every week. You don't have to go looking for them. And also, every week that the episode lands in your inbox, there is a link on that email that says access your free downloads here. And that will bring you to a folder. And then all the downloads that we ever offer you are in that folder, including this one. The Personal Bill of Rights. Okay, I have the right to ask for what I want. I have the right to say no to requests or demands I cannot meet. I have the right to express all of my feelings. I have the right to change my mind. I have the right to make mistakes and not have to be perfect. I have the right to follow my own values and standards. I have the right to say no to anything when I feel I'm not ready, it is unsafe, or it violates my values. I have the right to determine my own priorities. I have the right not to be responsible for others' behaviors, actions, feelings, or problems. I have the right to expect honesty from others. I have the right to be angry at someone I love. I have the right to be uniquely myself. I have the right to feel scared and say, I'm afraid. I have the right to say, I don't know. I have the right not to give excuses or reasons for my behavior. I have the right to make decisions based on my feelings. I have the right to own my needs for personal space and time. I have the right to be playful and frivolous. I have the right to be healthier than those around me. I have the right to be in a non-abusive environment. I have the right to make friends and be comfortable around people. I have the right to change and grow. I have the right to have my needs and wants respected by others. I have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. I have the right to be happy. So,
Wow.
like I said, yeah, yeah, it's not an exhaustive list, and we'll get around to that in time. But looking at that, Mel, what strikes you there?
The first time I read through it, by the time I got to number 16, I heard a voice in my head saying, wow, these are very high expectations. And I was like, what's that? What's that voice about? And I sat with it and I found that asking all of these things for myself just felt so foreign.
Mm,
It felt uncomfortable. It felt isolating in a way. And I know it's as a direct result of lack of practice, for asking for things for myself and being okay with that. I feel it's as a result of spending all of my life people pleasing and not asking for enough for myself. The one that stands out a lot to me, and there's several, but number 9, I have the right not to be responsible for others' behaviors, actions, feelings, or problems. That one really rang a bell when I got to that one because I have a tendency to be the rescuer of not just people, but situations. And I don't say that in a martyrdom way, because if anything, it is actually an unhealthy behavior that I have. Um, I if I see or sense or experience a situation that feels uncomfortable, or if somebody says something and I can see it going in the wrong direction, or I can see somebody else taking offense, I have a tendency to jump in and try to steer the conversation or the situation in a direction that might have less of, um, a conflicting outcome. And that's just to save myself, really, at the end of the day. Or, I mean, it might be to save other people too from, fucking up and saying something that they later regret. But um, I have a hard time sitting and just letting people say and do their thing,
mm,
and be responsible for what they've said and done, especially if it's somebody who I'm, associated with through my family. Uh,
yeah.
because I feel that that judgment is not just on them, but it's on me as well. So, it is very liberating to step back and just allow others to be and say and do whatever they do, and for them to accept the responsibility for that, and for me not to. I can
Yeah.
separate myself.
Yeah. Yeah. It is an uncomfortable thing to let's say start to begin changing this, let's say to not jump in where you previously would have. It feels like there's you can feel the urge, can't you? Like the urge doesn't go away.
Well, I give you a solid example.
Do.
So, as you know, my kids are in a band,
Mm-hmm.
and every time they are preparing to go to their gig,
Mm.
there is this lead up to leaving the house. Now, this lead up can start a couple of days before the actual gig. And it's me interfering and planting a seed to prepare for a seamless transition from house to car into venue. Because what tends to happen is we tell the kids we have to leave at 6 o'clock. And at 5:45, they're disassembling the drum kit. They're grabbing their guitar. They're shouting around the house, who saw my lead? Who saw my guitar stand? Did anyone see my pick? Anyone see me drumsticks? And there is a stress that is created before we even get into the car that is carried on the car ride into the venue. And it's it's a very uncomfortable feeling for me when I feel it could be done with less stress. So what I have a tendency to do is if the gig is on a Saturday, from Thursday, I am setting the scene. All right, lads, just a reminder, if you're doing a rehearsal on Saturday, it needs to be done by 4 o'clock. I want the drum kit and the guitars and everything in the car by 5 o'clock. And then we'll have an hour to chill out before we go, blah, blah, blah. That rolls over into Friday. Saturday comes along and I already feel my nails, that scene from Planes, Trains and Automobiles where his nails are stuck in the steering wheel. I already feel that tension because they're like, oh, well, the rehearsal was changed and now we won't be done with the rehearsal until this time or that time. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's not enough time to, create a more seamless transition. And so what I did recently was I left the house. I was
Mm.
not able to attend the gig anyway. I had something on later that evening, but I left the house earlier than I needed to so
Mm-hmm.
that I was not present for the shuffle from the house into the car. I just left and I went over to a friend's house and she knew that I was coming for that reason. And at one point, and one of my kids was actually on his way home from like a football game and still wasn't home on time. And I knew that that was going to cause more stress. So I picked up my phone in my friend's company to text my child to be like, you need to get home. If you're not home, blah, blah, blah. And she very gently took the phone out of my hand and just placed it beside her and started a conversation about something else. And she
Yeah.
said to me, you are here for a reason. Practice that reason.
Oh, I love that.
Right? Step away. You're stepping away. And guess what happened? The
What?
gig happened. And I didn't hear anything about any sort of a stressful, I'm sure that there was a kerfuffle and the usual stuff, or maybe me getting out of the way was actually what needed to happen,
Mm.
because it's sometimes my reaction to the stress that furthers the stress.
Yes.
But my point is, it was so liberating to not be a part of it. I have a right to not be responsible for others' behaviors, actions, feelings, or problems. I
Mm-hmm.
stepped away from what was stressing me out, knowing that they had everything that they needed.
Mm.
They were all fed and watered before I left the house. I made sure everybody had what they needed from me. And then I removed myself. And it was the greatest feeling of all time.
Yeah, you sent me a message that you had done that, and you should have heard me. Like I squealed as I was listening. I was like, what?
I know, because you know how hard that is for me.
I really do. And it was such a moment of celebration. I was so proud of you. I was so pleased for you. And this is you taking action. This is you doing the things, putting into practice
Yeah.
the thing, and once again, because of this, Melanie. you will have what you want. You will get what you want, which is peace. You just want. And that's what all of the, reminding, like basically you're like Siri. Like you can program Siri. If they need somebody to remind them what time it is and what their schedule is, like let them use Alexa or Siri because she does that too,
Mm.
you know? So you don't have to be other people's Siri or other people's Alexa or someone else's clock. Um, and so yeah, you have the right to a peaceful Saturday. I have the right. And that's the beautiful thing about this Bill of Rights is that we get to write them ourselves. So you can say, well, I have a right to peace. I have a right to a stress-free Saturday, you know? And as you said, by you getting out of the way, you actually open up a space that gives the boys the right
Mm.
to learn about having your shit together, like learn about stress. I have the right to learn my lessons in my own way, the hard way. They have that right. They have the
Yeah.
right to determine their own priorities as well. And so, as you said, half of the stress is about, you trying to get them to organize themselves in a way that you see fit, which is really your will. Again, that's you imposing your will. And that becomes then a source of a point of contention between you. Because as we already kind of looked at in a prior episode about the socks on the floor, the bedrooms, tidying the rooms, we know that when you are, or any of us are imposing our will on another person, there are rights and needs being, we're kind of impinging on them. We're stepping on their right. Like a kid's right is to, you know, to autonomy. They have a right to kind of learn their own lessons, their own ways. Um, and so you got out of their way as well. And maybe if I was talking to one of them, they'd be like, I have a right to be in a band without me mom, or I have a right to have an
Without my
appointment
mom
with,
shoving me drumsticks up my arse.
I have a right to be late.
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah.
right to be disorganized.
Yeah. Well, there we back to autonomy.
Yes. And what they will do eventually, maybe, and maybe they won't, because we both know people who never learned what, through the consequences of being disorganized for whatever reason. We're not, here to judge, but like the consequences of being disorganized for me anyway are such a source of stress that I choose to be better organized. Now there are some people who will just never make that choice. They will just never choose to be organized, or else they just won't be able to for whatever reason. So yes. Now let's just say, right, so that's you taking action and getting out of the way. Now let's just say there was a scenario where they were like saying to you, you wanted to remove yourself and you wanted to solve this particular, you want to assert this particular right to not be responsible, right? So we could even end it there. I have the right to not be the responsible one always. So it's not even I have the right to be responsible for others' behaviors, actions, feelings. Like I have the right to not be the responsible one here. I have the right to not be responsible for your timekeeping.
Yeah.
you know? So let's just say you were exerting your right to not be responsible and you were kind of relinquishing a bit of responsibility and you want to get out of the house. But one of the kids are like, I need you to, or else they're trying to pull you back in. They're standing in the way of you asserting this right and claiming it as yours.
Mm.
So here's where we come in with the actual language. We want to give you language. So a hard boundary and a boundary set without compassion might sound like, I'm not responsible for your,
Shit.
yeah, I'm not responsible for you not having your shit together. That might sound like, because that is a correct, I'm not responsible for your timekeeping or whatever it is. I'm not responsible for that. Now that sounds, that lacks compassion to me, to my ear, you
Right.
know? Now here, so do you want to have a go or will I just read out the statement here?
I have the statement right in front of me. So if I have a go, I'll end up reading your statement and it'll just sound too perfect. So why don't you read your statement?
Okay. Okay. So if somebody is, let's say, coming between you and expressing you expressing taking action on this, right? You could be like, look, I I'm all for the band. You have my support. And at the same time, I'm not always going to be available to help you organize yourself to get out the door. So I'm going to let you be in charge of it this time. Okay? Thanks for understanding.
And you know what? I have to say that that sounds like my language. I feel
Yes.
that I speak to them in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I would give myself credit for being compassionate in how I speak to them.
Yeah.
Are there times when I have not? Yes, I'm sure there's been many times where I've lost my shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned from that because it never has a good outcome.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that. And
Yeah.
it's just so gentle and
Yeah.
to the point.
Yeah. Like I love you. Love the band. Love everything you're doing. Here for it. And at the same time, I'm here for me too. You know,
Yeah.
there are things that are important to me too. And right now, I have a different priority. And so I'm going to let you be responsible for your own, I'm going to let you see how stressful it is when you don't have your stuff together, and you can decide whether or not you want to live with that stress. So that can be how a boundary can sound like that, which is great news,
Mm.
you
Yeah,
know?
and this is what I'm talking about, what I had said in the beginning. Who knew
Mm,
that, a boundary could be so compassionate? It's just one of those words that has
mm.
become, synonymous with um harsh endings.
Yeah, it's a punishment. It sounds like a punishment.
It would be really interesting to ask people to define boundary, because
Yeah,
I doubt that you're going to find a lot of people who would state that it's, a gift, which a lot of the
yeah,
times it is,
yeah, yeah.
and not
And
just for yourself.
yeah, and one of the ways I like to describe it is it is the point at which I end and you begin.
It is the point at which I end and you begin. Oh, wow.
Mm,
That's a really nice definition of that.
yeah. Yeah. And if you think about it in terms of like in enmeshment and especially between a mother and their children, because I mean, th this child literally grew in your belly, like I made you,
Hmm.
so I,
I brought you into the world. I'll take you out of it. That has been said. That has been said on a couple of occasions.
so like at one point, and this is actually a thing. So in just a little bit of nerd for any psychology nerd or developmental human development nerds out there. When a child is born, of course, they don't really have consciousness as we would know it, but there's the child, when they are born, has no sense of separation, none, because their life up till then, like they are, and there's no conscious thinking either, but the child is like conceived within you, grows within you. I am mammy, mammy is me. I am the womb is me, right? Everything is just one thing.
Hmm.
There's no differentiation. How did I say that? But it doesn't
I
matter. You know
think
what I
I think that might be it. Different.
differentiation, I said. But anyway, there is no differentiation between all the things. So, and you can imagine how, like, this always gets me. Like, as I find this, like, this must be so hard when we are, it's no wonder we don't remember our infancy. But when they are born and they come out into the world, the bright light is me, I am the light. Mommy is me still, I am mom. And then the boob, when they're breastfeeding or the bottle or whatever, however it is they're being fed, it is still me. The bottle is me, I am the bottle. There's
Mm.
no, so over time, they eventually learn that that is not me and I am a thing
Um,
apart from this thing.
exactly. That is not me, and I'm on my own. And we talk about separation anxiety. That's a
Hmm.
thing. It's such a thing.
Yeah. And so when yeah, so and this continues on through life. This is the kind of like an ongoing life thing where we realize that, the thing that we kind of like mash together the thing. So in other words, let's just say chocolate and happiness for the want of a better definition. Like, my need or else my need is for let's say my need is for company or my need is for romance. That's my need.
Mm.
But I'm settling for chocolate. So you keep going to the chocolate and you're like, why am I eating the chocolate? And you realize the chocolate becomes a symbol, or the food or the eating becomes a symbol for the real need, which might be companionship, which might be
Mm.
blah, blah, blah. So the same thing is happening all the time as we grow. And then in human development, so when a child starts to become verbal, let's say, they will look at, like, all dogs are just doggy. It's just doggy. That's what it is, right? It's doggy. And they might even point at a sheep and say, doggy,
Yeah.
right? Because they only have the kind of like, it's called a schemata. They only have a kind of mental model
Yeah. So I'm
of
laughing.
dog. And
I'm
so
laughing because
yeah, any, what?
I'm sorry, I have to butt in as I do, but I'm laughing because I'm thinking of my child. He must have been very posh because as a little fella, he loved salmon. And he loved salmon to the point that when we started giving him like a bit of ham, he called it salmon ham. You remember that?
No, I don't.
Oh, Brad would absolutely remember it. Brad and Christina used to be in stitches at that. So I'd put salmon in front of him and he'd go, salmon. And then I'd put ham in front of him and he'd go, salmon ham. Yeah.
Exactly. So when they learn the concept of doggy, it doesn't matter what the animal is. If it has four legs and a tail and is fluffy,
Yeah.
it's a dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as their cognitive development becomes more sophisticated, they start then, like, at this age now, they can look at a dog and be like, that's a Yorkshire Terrier, that's a wolfhound, that's a beagle. Now we know the nuance, the different breeds, and so you just become more sophisticated in your mental models.
Yeah.
Right. So think of the boundary as where I end and you begin. It's literally just a sophistication of being able to determine that point
Mm.
where I end and you begin. So let's go to another scenario on this one. So I have the right to not be responsible for other people's behaviors, actions, feelings, experiences, problems, whatever. I'm going to give a general scenario now. So let's say a friend has a complaint, or a friend is, you know, out with you and blaming you for not being available when they needed you, or a friend is expecting you to be available because they need you, right? And
Right.
if you are just not available and you are practicing, like, because in the old model, what we'll do is, oh, that doesn't really suit me because I'm not available, but fuck it, I don't know how to set a boundary. So, okay. And you make yourself available, and then there's maybe a little bit of resentment, or even if there isn't, there might be, it'll show up at some point down the road, because as we know and we've discussed before, at some point down the road, that friend will fuck up and you'll be like, after I did this for you and this for you
Yeah.
and this for you,
Yeah.
you
The
know?
list.
Yeah. So a boundary statement in this sense is, I care about you. Of course, I care about you and I care about what you're going through. And at the same time, I'm just not available. It doesn't suit me. Whatever it is you have to say, as much as I would love to help you and I'm delighted for you, at the same time, I have this other thing going on, or else at the same time, I'm really tired and I'm going to have to prioritize rest. You're not even like going to have to. At the same time, I'm very tired and I'm going to prioritize my rest. And um, like, I want to tell you the truth, and thanks for understanding. You know?
Yeah.
Now, I said, yeah, there was something recently where I found myself, and I initially lied. I initially lied because it was just my old conditioning coming in, where it was like I wasn't available for a thing, and I kind of told a lie, and I was like, "Oh, I'm not well. I'm just not feeling good."
Mm.
Just feeling sick. And instantly, I was like, "Oh." I caught myself doing it instant, and this was just through a text message. I sent the message. She was like, "Hey, do you want to go for a walk?" And I said, "Not feeling great. I'd rather not." Now, I, you also have the right to not, you know, divulge. So, like, I could have been like, yeah, I have the right to a white lie, whatever. Depends on the context. But in that moment, I was like, because this is a friend I didn't have to lie to. And the truth was that I was hiding something. It wasn't that I wasn't feeling well. It was that I had, kind of like just, I had done it to myself. It was self-imposed. I had done a thing that just didn't feel great. So I sent back immediately and I said, you know what? That was a lie. I'm not sick. Oh no, do you know what I said to her? She wants to, she was like, do you want to go for a walk? And I said, no, I'm not feeling great, so I better not because I don't want to give it to you. Don't want to pass it on to you. So I was acting like as if I had some kind of a bug.
Right. And that you were doing her a favor by you not showing up.
Yeah. And so I caught myself in the lie and it just hit me in the whole, Amanda, that's not you practicing telling the truth. Because you have the right to just say no and not be there if you don't want to be there, if you're just not feeling great. I was just feeling under the weather. I was feeling depressed, to be quite honest. I was just having a
Mm,
bad afternoon
mm,
and I wasn't great company.
right.
So I came back instantly into the message and I said, hold on, that was a lie. I don't have a bug. It's not that I'm afraid I'm going to give you something. I just don't feel great because I had eaten shite all morning or else the night before. At some point, and I was after making myself
Right.
sick, basically. I
Yeah.
didn't make myself sick, but I just wasn't feeling. I was just feel. I had a food hangover, basically, is what the truth was.
Yes. Yeah.
So I said that, and I corrected myself, and I said, "Listen, I'm not sick. There's nothing I have to give to you." I said, "I'm just, kind of like."
Mm.
I don't know what the words I used, but I just kind of corrected myself and I said, so that's the truth.
So, a question for you there.
Yeah.
For me, those two things are not too far from each other. Like you weren't well, and I know you went on to say that you had a bug, but why was it
Yeah.
so important for you to correct that?
It was important for me to correct it because this is a person to whom I can tell the truth.
Right.
This is a person, and this is a person who could hold it. And so I felt like this is not the kind of person that I needed. No, I don't need to elaborate. I don't need to blah, but I also didn't want to lie to somebody who our thing is showing up honestly with each other.
Yes.
That's our thing. And we are each, we are safe people. So like I was like, no, don't start this with your safe people. Like
Yes.
they are your people to practice telling the truth to.
Mm-hmm.
They are people to practice saying no to for reasons that are literally just, I don't need to make up an excuse. In other words, so this was me practicing my right to say no, even though I didn't have to offer an explanation. I could have just said, no, thanks, not feeling, I just don't feel up to it. I could have said that. But because I told a lie, I did that was my old conditioning. Instead of just saying no, I said no because I'm sick and I don't want to give you the bug.
Yeah.
And then I was like, what the fuck did you do that for, Amanda? Like, you didn't have to do that. Like, you have the right to say no. So the only reason I took it back was almost like an amends. I just made an immediate amends because I was like, actually, I wasn't honest there. That was a lie.
How did she react to that?
She said, let me get the message right now. Hold on.
Yeah, this is great because I think, using real experiences, obviously not divulging names, but
No.
I think that's most useful.
Okay. So we had arranged to meet. And she texted me to see, how you fixed. And I said, this is embarrassing, but anyway, I said, hiya, not feeling well, don't want to pass it to you, so I'm just going to stay home if that's okay. And she
Yeah.
was like, oh no, that's so shit. Of course, rest up. And then she said, do you need me to drop anything off to you?
Okay, because I was wondering if there was anything like that in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then you're like, the guilt kicks in and you're like, oh shit.
And then I said to her, thanks for the offer, but I'm good for all the things. All right.
Yeah.
And
And is that
uh,
when you sat with it?
yeah,
Yeah.
Anyway, she said, yeah, rest up. You need a bit of rest and recovery. Let's just hope it's only a 24-hour thing. And now I feel like an absolute asshole, you
Right,
know?
because now it's growing legs. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, okay, to be honest, this is self-inflicted. I let last week overwhelm me. And so I coped, I went back to my old eating ways to cope. And I'm just struggling with that. So I lied and I'm sorry. There's nothing to pass to you. And I did this to myself.
And how did she
Right.
respond?
She said, firstly, I'm so sorry this overwhelm has taken hold and caused,
Oh,
this reaction for you. Try not to be too hard on yourself. Easier said than done, I know. She said, but remember, you're trying to juggle and balance and cope. and live all at once, one day at a time, and kisses. And then she said, second, thanks for telling me the truth. It's hard to admit when we fall and hurt ourselves due to our own actions. I'm sending you a big hug and we'll reschedule our stroll and chats for next week.
Oh, so she literally held you. She didn't judge for a second. She
Yeah.
offered you everything that you needed in that moment.
Yeah. And then, I said to her, thanks for understanding. And then I said, love how this bullshit turns me into a lion cunt.
But I
Mm.
mean, how, and I think,
Mm.
I know this is a very vulnerable thing, for you to be
Mm,
sharing here. However,
mm,
I
mm.
can promise you there is not one listener who hasn't done this, but not necessarily the second half, where they've come back and said, actually, I'm not in Sweden. I'm actually just down the road in case I run into you at Spar.
Yeah, I'm down the road dying from a food hangover. And the
Yeah.
shame of that, because, I don't know if I have explicitly said it on here before. But like I'm sober from alcohol 7.5 years, and my food sobriety, for the want of a better phrase, is something that I'm still, working on and working through and not sober with. Um, and it's a much different thing. It's not as absolute as alcohol is. You're either drinking alcohol or you're not. Um, so the whole food journey is, because there's the substances and then there are the behaviors around it, and then there's so much around it. And I still have shame that because I find in my thinking, I'm like, my God, being able to feed yourself is like the most primal thing. And how do I not, how do I get this wrong so much? And so I have a lot of shame around it.
Yeah.
And so if I am sitting at home with a food hangover, and that could mean anything from didn't eat all day and then had a big meal and just wrecked myself.
Yeah. Hmm.
It could mean anything from, and now I have, digestive problems, whatever they might be.
Hmm.
Because the older I get, the less my body is letting me get away with the ways in which I abuse food.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, so in that situation, um, I had the right to decline, but what I guess the context here is we had a pre-arranged meet. So we were
Hmm.
supposed to meet for a walk. And when it came around, I was food hungover. And I
Hmm.
was, and one of the ways I'm food hungover, like one of the ways food affects me now is that it does give me a kind of depression.
Oh, yeah.
So if
Mm.
I eat a certain way, I just go down into a, it's just into a kind of a hole.
Yeah.
And I have all the symptoms. So it's not just digestive, it's mental even. And I was just like, I just can't. I felt so shit. And there was shame and I was upset over it and everything. Um, so we had an arrangement to meet. I had the right to change my mind. I had the right to say no. And what I did in my old conditioning was I said no, but then made an excuse for it.
Hmm.
And then I returned and said, actually, here's the truth. So, yeah, I don't know how we got from boundaries onto that, but we did. So there it is. Um,
Well, like, I mean, I think that you must have felt so good after when you returned to your kind of authenticity.
yes,
Yeah.
it does feel good because part of the recovery model, and me being in a 12-step program, part of the recovery model is radical honesty. And it's catching yourself. It's part of like making the amends. So what you would have found there was that was basically a step 10, right?
Hmm.
Was I told a lie and then it is the lying. So I followed it up with, funny face, love how this turns me into a lying cunt. But the seriousness behind that is now this is how I'm perceiving myself. This really matters in sobriety. Your self-concept matters. And so
Hmm.
if I know myself as a liar, if I know myself as a coward, if I know myself as somebody who tells whether they are white lies or not, but somebody who is just not showing up as authentic, that affects my self-esteem.
Hmm.
And it is when my self-esteem is affected that I am going to turn to the thing
Yeah.
to escape from the discomfort and the pain of having no self-esteem. So integrity, all of these things matter. So in that was a step 10. I told a lie, I caught myself telling it, and then I went back and I made an amends. I made
Yeah.
it right. I made it right. Okay. Now, that's not something I could have done with a friend who wouldn't have held it. Right. Now, I have a right to struggle in my sobriety. I have a right to change my mind. I have a right to change my plans. I have all the rights around that scenario, but I was also practicing my program in the process.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would be something. Oh, here's another one. Here's another one. So number 10, here's ironically, I have the right to expect honesty from others.
Hmm.
So do you see how my right, my right to be able to speak honestly with my friends, like my friend had the right to expect honesty from me, and I didn't give it.
Hmm.
Honesty is a value, and it's a value that we share. And so I have the right to expect honesty from others. If I am going to go around claiming that right, like I have the right to expect honesty. In other words, another way of saying this is it's okay that honesty is important for me in a relationship that where someone's trying to shame you for, and it will, like it will come across and people be saying, you're too honest or whatever, or um,
Too
like
honest for your own good. Honest with detriment.
yeah, like have you ever been in a relationship or a friendship where, at some point, there's a form of dishonesty that goes on that just doesn't sit with you, and you're like, I really don't love that you do this, and you know, like I've definitely had somebody in the past say to me, basically call me a fucking idiot for being honest about something,
Yeah.
right? So somebody was after shortchanging themselves, in other words. I got away with something. Somebody was after shortchanging themselves to my benefit.
Yeah.
And I went back and said, you gave me too much change. Let's just say that was the example. You gave me too much. Here, I owe you 50 quid. You paid me twice, right?
Mm.
That's because I just couldn't live with myself if I didn't do that, right? And then I was told that I was too honest for my own good, that I was a fucking idiot.
Wow. By the person that you gave it back to.
No, 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 by somebody else who was an
Yeah.
observer of this, who knew that I was basically, presenting myself, um, disclosing this, saying, hey, because their attitude was I should have tried to get away with it. I should have just took the money and run,
Mm.
right? But I was like, well, yeah, but it's going to come up in their accounts. Like they're going to know, you know? So anyway, I was told I was a fucking idiot. And then I'm like, hold on for a second. So does that mean that, like, so honesty is not what we established or what I established was this person doesn't value honesty to the level I do. And I was letting them minimize or mock me or judge me or whatever, shame me for valuing honesty just because
Mm.
it's not high up on their list of values, where it's very high up on my list of values. And then once again, I'm being made to feel wrong for my values, right? So I have a right to expect, like I've honesty as a value. Like it's okay that I value honesty, just because you don't. There's another right here where it says I have the right to be healthier than those around me,
Hmm.
right? That's an interesting one too. So let's just say I have the right to not drink. I have the right to not smoke.
It's funny, somebody said to me recently, you know, are you still not drinking? And I knew the question was I knew it was judgment.
Hmm.
And the question wasn't, how are you feeling since you decided not to drink and again, I've said this a million times. I started out with 100 days. I'm coming on to 7 months and it's been great. And, I don't know where it's going yet. But everyone in my close circle has been very supportive. And then you get the one person who says, "You still not drinking yet?" And when I responded with, "No, I haven't had a drink since April," the response I got was, "When are you going to quit that bullshit?"
Mm,
And the person who said it is someone that I love and who is generally funny and was likely looking for a laugh within the room.
mm,
And I did just, I laughed it off because I also didn't want to get too serious. We were having a nice time. And so, that kind of leads me to, I feel that I can practice boundaries and I can practice boundary statements. What I'm not always prepared for is how to further the conversation, the interaction, the scene when they continue nipping at it. And maybe it's just a case of repeating the same thing over and over again. But,
yeah.
that's where it kind of becomes difficult. I can practice my statement, and in an ideal situation, I'd love for them to just walk away then, or to be like, okay, and walk away. But if there is further commentary, it just makes it more difficult. And it also sometimes sends me into the explanation and the
Yes.
apology and the verbal emojis and the softening, because I
Yeah.
can see that this person is not really hearing what I'm saying or has other questions about it. And I'm not necessarily in a position or mood to elaborate.
But
No, yeah.
they're the words. Literally you just said it there. Say, listen, Bridie, I know you think you're being funny, but it's not funny. And I really don't feel like elaborating. Can we change the subject?
Mm,
Now, that is more of a harder boundary. And that sometimes that is when you come in with a harder boundary, right? So it's not that you're not being compassionate. It's that now the person is not hearing, they're not picking, they're not doing their part. So I could say, listen, so you can start with soft and say something along the lines of, so in terms of I have the right to be healthier than those around me. So if they're either pressuring you about your decisions or they're kind of mocking you or giving you a hard time, you begin with, yeah, well, look, this is what's best for me right now, and I appreciate your support. Yeah, but it's bullshit. Like, when are you gonna, like, you're boring without alcohol. And you just repeat. This is where you do the broken record and say, that may be, but this is what's right for me right now. And then you can even bring in the Bill of Rights. And you know what? I have a right to prioritize my well-being. Or you could say it's something like along the line, how I would say something like that. I would say to them, I'm going to now just say the sentence that I recently learned, and that is that I have a right to prioritize my wellness. So I will
yes.
kind of like preempt the personal statement with like, here's something I learned this week. Here's something my therapist told me this week. Or
Mm,
here's something I learned in therapy this week. I have a right to prioritize my well-being. So next topic. And you're kind of getting a little bit funny there. You're kind of using humor to maybe move it along.
mm,
Right. So the first one is the little bit of a softer one and say, yeah, well, I'm choosing what's right for me right now. And if they pressure you, you say, oh, here, let me just speak out loud the phrase I just learned in therapy this week. I have the right to prioritize my wellness. How's that? Now, let's change the subject. And if they continue on that, say, listen, I understand you might feel differently about this. Made
that's,
my decision.
yeah.
I'm not open to discussing it. I
Mhm.
don't feel like elaborating it.
End of,
I'm not
end of
comfortable. Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, exactly. I'm just not comfortable talking about this. Can we change the subject? And if you are in a situation where somebody keeps hunting you down over something, that's when you flip into consequences. You say, okay, so I've made myself clear. You're obviously not open to that. So if you want, like, if you're going to keep insisting, I'm going to leave the room now, or I'm going to end the call now, or the conversation is over.
Mm,
And I'm going to literally walk out the door. So that's kind of like how you escalate that thing. Is you start with the kind of more compassionate, empathic, thanks for understanding type of boundary, and then with the bring invoking your right, and then with the spelling out the consequence if you don't fuck off, if you don't back off.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I said in the beginning, that reclaiming of self is very comforting and feels very grounding.
yeah, absolutely. So we have all of these here. Another one, I have the right to be in a non-abusive environment. The scenario is that somebody speaks aggressively towards you or shouts at you or whatever. And you say, I'm not comfortable being spoken to like this. Please lower your voice or I'll need to leave. The words are literally right there, and that's it.
Hmm.
And if they continue, say, I've asked you to lower your voice and I'm going to leave if you don't. Okay.
Are you going to leave this Bill of Rights in the
Oh,
notes?
yeah. Oh,
Right.
not in the notes, but once you subscribe, if you become a subscriber, which is free
Hmm.
and which is just like signing up to a newsletter, this will be including the Bill of Rights and all of these examples of it in action. So a kind of a hypothetical scenario along with a statement,
Mm.
you know? These friendships, so somebody is like giving you shit about who you're spending time with, and you're saying, well, these friendships are important to me and I appreciate your understanding, you
Yeah.
know?
Oh, it's so direct and curt, and I love it.
hmm I love this one at the end. I have the right to be happy. So somebody downplays your joy about a personal success.
Mm.
And the statement here is, well, look, this makes me happy, and I'd really appreciate if you could celebrate with me,
Hmm.
and if you can't, that you at least you won't try and, downplay my celebration because I'm proud of this.
I like that.
Yeah, there we go. So, yeah, there we go. We had a slight tangent in the middle, and I'll probably die of vulnerability afterwards. But hey, it's my turn maybe to be vulnerable because you've done it plenty of times.
Well,
It's only
that's it.
fair.
And, listen back, see how you feel,
Yeah.
and know that it helps others to hear real life situations.
Well, that's it. Of course, I will leave it in. I will. I will. So we will be back, same bat time, same bat channel next week. And in the meantime, of course, what we would love to hear is we would love to hear from you. We would love your comments. We would love some engagement. We'd love to hear which of these Bill of Rights you're going to work on. What would you add to it? Because you're allowed to add your own. One that I added not too long ago was like, I have the right to get what I want and then change my mind once I get it. Because that
Mhm.
was a big one. Like I'm allowed to get what I want and then decide when I have it that actually this isn't it. Um, so yeah, what would you add to it? What would your personal Bill of Rights look like? What are your boundary statements? What are the things? What do you want us to talk about? What do you want to hear more of? And I'll talk to you next week, Mel.
See you, Amanda.
Bye.
Bye.